I remember that night like it was yesterday, and it still sends shivers down my spine. My wife Emma was in labor, and we rushed to the hospital like bats. She cried out in pain, and I felt helpless. I was full of fear and anxiety if I could become a father. After waiting for hours and walking the whitewashed sanitary corridors of the hospital, the moment came. The doctors and nurses took Emma into the delivery room, and I held her hand and told her she was going to be fine. I mean, what else can you do in a situation like this? It was a big roller coaster. It seemed like an eternity, but within minutes I heard that scream, that heartbreaking scream that announced you had become a parent. They placed our little boy in Emma's arms, and I have never seen her smile so brightly in my life. The tears flowed, but they were tears of happiness, tears of joy. We spent time together as a new little family. We couldn't take our eyes off our precious bundle of joy. I named him Max. He has his mother's eyes and nose. I couldn't believe how lucky I was. But as time went on, they told Max he needed regular checkups. It was to check vital signs and make sure she was okay after the birth. I've heard this before, so I assumed it was standard procedure. I kissed Emma and Max, told them I'd be right back, and watched them carry her to her crib. Then everything started to fall apart. A few hours passed and I was nervous. I wanted to see my son again, to hug him again, but no one seemed to know where he was. When I asked the nurse at the front desk, she seemed embarrassed. "Excuse me, there is no such information. We have to wait for the doctors." He spoke with a trembling voice. I expected. I became more and more nervous. Even the doctors didn't seem to know where Max was. They went back and forth, looking through the records and checking out the children's section. Emma was also worried, and I could see the fear in her eyes. I was very worried. My son disappeared from the hospital. I shouldn't have done that. It was a nightmare. As the minutes turned into hours, no one could give us a definitive answer. And I hugged the nurse Max brought in earlier. She was a cold and indifferent middle-aged woman. "Where is my son?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and fear. "You took him to a few trials and now he's gone." "Where?" He didn't make eye contact and said, "I don't know, sir. Maybe he was with another nurse. I'll go take a look." My heart pounded as I followed him down the hall, fists clenched. We went from room to room looking at the babies we saw, but none of them were Max. He seemed to vanish into thin air. I felt my face turn red with anger and yelled for the nurse to find the boy. He looked me dead in the eye and said something that still haunts me today. "I'm sorry, but I can't find your son." I lost it. I couldn't believe my ears. Did he lose my son? How can a nurse lose a baby? It was beyond comprehension. In that moment, my whole world came crashing down and I felt a wave of emotions, from anger to despair. It was chaos in the hospital. They called security and the police and even shut down the hospital. But as the investigation continued, it became clear that something terrible had happened. I looked at the CCTV footage and it was very clear. The nurse who took Max left the hospital with our baby in her arms and hiding him under her clothes. He stole the baby and disappeared into the night. The police chased him, but he had already disappeared. This nurse lost her baby a few years ago and couldn't bear the pain. She was convinced that our baby was meant for her and that fate had brought Max into her life. It was a twisted and crazy opinion, but it really happened. Days turned into weeks and our hearts ached for nothing. We didn't know if we would ever see Max again. The police collected evidence and suspects, but they all came to a dead end. It was a living nightmare. Emma and I were caught in an endless vortex of sadness and despair. But one day I was really surprised. The nurse who stole Max and ruined our lives has changed her mind. He couldn't take the guilt and the pain anymore. He took Max to the hospital, put him to bed, left him a heartfelt apology, and disappeared into the night. After hearing this news, I went to the hospital with both hope and fear. Our little one sleeps soundly in his bed, always safe and sound. I held her close to my heart and cried. Emma and I hugged, and it was like the weight of the world was lifted off our shoulders. Our baby is back and we are healthy. It was a terrible ordeal, but it had a happy ending. Max is safe, and we will never lose him again. On that fateful day, the mall was busy. It was crowded with families and shoppers, the store was busy, and the smell of cinnamon rolls was in the air. My wife Sarah and I decided it was the perfect day to take our daughter Lily to the local mall. I thought it was just an ordinary day. Lily, 10 months old, was the light of our eyes. Her angelic face and smile captivated everyone she met. Pushing the stroller around toy stores, clothing stores and coffee shops, we felt like the luckiest parents in the world. Our first awkward encounter was in a crowded toy store. Sarah picks out a stuffed animal for Lily, and I browse the shelves for something she likes. I looked around and saw a man looking at us with a confused expression. The colorless hair and black eyes made me feel uncomfortable. It was hard to tell because his eyes were on our daughter. I put his fear down to paranoia and told him that people were taking care of the child, but the man's anxiety became more and more obvious. He seems to be studying us. He was looking for toys and not interacting with anyone. He saw us. The knot in my stomach tightened. I asked Sarah, "Do you see this person?" I asked. I whispered. He looked at the stranger and winked at me. "Yes," he replied in a whisper. "He's been following us for a while." We quickly decided to leave the toy store. I want to get rid of my worries. As we entered the busy food court of the mall, we were greeted with a glimmer of hope. We thought the public should help us get rid of it. But as we walked from stall to stall for lunch, we realized he was still there, following us like a shadow. Panic ensued. I whispered to Sarah, "I think he's following us. Now take Lily to the warden." Sarah grabbed Lily and headed for the nearest guard. His eyes widened in fear. As I watched them leave, my attention turned to the stalker a few feet behind me. My heart was pounding, so I walked up to him and said, "Why are you following us?" The man did not immediately answer. He just smirked at her. There is no warmth in his eyes. "She's a pretty girl." Finally he spoke. "Do you guys hurt? Crying? Diapers? They need constant attention." His words touched my heart. It was clear that this man harbored hatred and malice towards the child. I couldn't get him close to Lily. I am determined to protect my family at all costs. The guard who had previously approached Sarah now approached us and we felt tense. The man took a step back but smiled menacingly. I was just about to leave. He turned and disappeared into the maze of stores and hallways of the mall. The guard immediately called for backup, and my wife and I clung to Lily, our hearts pounding. We made a statement to mall security, and they assured us they would do everything possible to identify and locate the man. We were nervous and jittery about leaving the mall that day. The ordeal left us with a deep sense of vulnerability and fear. One man's hatred of children led to an unimaginable tragedy. It was an experience that will stay with us, haunt our dreams, and leave a scar on our hearts. Security measures at the mall were tightened in the days following the incident. I saw several officers patrolling the building and was told by the security staff that they were reviewing the CCTV footage. We continued to do our best to get back to normal, but the memories of that day will never go away. The encounter at the mall reminded me that danger can lurk even in the most ordinary places. I could not forget the hatred I felt for that child and the person who targeted my innocent daughter. The experience was a powerful lesson in sobriety and a reminder of our deep love and protection for Lelia. Even though we moved, this event changed our lives. It made us pay attention and recognize the darkness we can find in the most ordinary places. We will always cherish our time with Lily and keep her close to us. We know we are protectors in a beautiful and dangerous world. I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural until my daughter came into this world. It all started that fateful night, a few weeks after I brought her home from the hospital. Little did I know that the sweet, innocent face that captured our hearts would become the source of my deepest fears. Her name was Lily, and she was an absolute angel by day. But when the clock struck 4:08 a.m., she began to cry every night. That cry was unlike any other cry I had ever heard. It sent shivers down my spine like the cry of a tormented soul. At first I thought it was normal things for children. Maybe it's a stomachache or teething. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, I realized that something terrible was happening. We tried to feed him, change his diaper, and put him to sleep, but by 4:08 a.m., nothing could calm him down. My wife and I could not sleep and were anxious and anxious. Sleep deprivation affects us and we search for answers, so we decided to take Lily to the pediatrician to find out what was causing her discomfort at night. After examining Lily and running a series of tests, the doctor concluded that she was innocent. Physically, she was as healthy as could be. My doctor assured me that it was just a phase and that I would eventually get over it. But as parents, we couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The doctor's explanation made no sense to us. Weeks passed and like clockwork, every night Lily started crying at 4:08 a.m. We felt like an invisible force was following our house and we were powerless to stop it. My husband and I could not explain or alleviate our daughter's strange nighttime habits. We tried asking family and friends for advice, but no one had ever heard of him. Some offered to help and stayed to witness the phenomenon, but all seemed equally confused and offered no solutions. As the days turned into months, the situation became more difficult. The constant stress left us exhausted and our relationship strained. Every night I felt dread as 4:08 approached, and our world would soon descend into a living nightmare. One evening, overwhelmed by despair and convinced that something evil was lurking in the shadows, we called a priest to bless our house. The priest sprinkled holy water, recited prayers, and performed solemn ceremonies to cleanse our house of all evil. But that didn't stop Lily from crying at night. The priest left scratching his head just like us. We decided to set up a camera in Lily's room to capture the strange things that happen in her night. The pictures were terrible. At exactly 4:08 in the morning, Lily's screams grew louder and the room went dark, as if someone invisible had descended on her bed. We were so excited to see the photos. I showed the footage to doctors, priests, and even paranormal experts we consulted. They all had the same reaction: disbelief. None of them were available for comment. We felt trapped in our own horror movie, and there was no director to shout cut. Years passed and I watched Lily grow up, and her behavior during the day was still as sweet as ever. But his nocturnal episodes continued like clockwork. At 4:08 a.m. every night, we accepted that we may never know the cause of his pain. One evening, as I sat in a dark room filled with years of unresolved questions, I heard a faint whisper. It was barely audible, but it sent shivers down my spine. I followed the sound to Lily's room. The whispers grew louder and clearer. It was a child's voice and it filled me with fear. "It's mine, Dad. He's mine." I walked into Lily's room, my heart pounding in anticipation of finding a stranger in shadows. But there was no one. Only Lily was standing on the bed, wide-eyed and dazed. I held her in my arms and tried to calm my pounding heart. "Who are you? Who are you talking about?" Lily's innocent eyes looked at me and she said in an innocent voice, "Daddy, the girl who cried at 4:08 in the morning. It's mine now." The room grew cold and we felt the presence of an evil force around us. I ran out of the room, clutching Lily to my chest, trying to escape the nightmare that our lives had become. My wife and I decided to leave everything that made us happy and move far away to a new house. We hoped that the change of scenery would end Lily's suffering and the evil forces that plagued our lives. But when we left our old home, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was following us, that whatever was holding Lily wasn't ready to let her go. The years passed, the fears subsided, and Lily became a happy, healthy child. We never talked about those dark days, preferring to leave the past behind. But sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing and look at the clock. 4:08 a.m. I remembered the horror that had once engulfed our lives and prayed that it would never happen again.